Yes, hi, good evening, everyone, and a big pleasure for us to be able to present our work to you tonight. My name is Dagro. I'm the director of Nature Squared and a professor of business models for regenerative agriculture. And I'm honored to present the speakers of tonight, which is firstly Sander de Haas, who is an absolutely amazing expert on landscape restoration interventions. And it was in Nairobi around 5 years ago that during the Global Landscapes Forum, we met once more, because we worked together quite a lot, but we met to host a workshop for young professionals in landscape. And while we were doing our workshop, we identified a need for a very easy and accessible platform of landscape restoration. And that is where the journey took off. And then also my very talented colleague, Eli Morel, she came on board as a project manager to bring also Greener.Land into the future, because we have many fantastic ideas for it for the future. And yeah, again, a big pleasure for me to introduce them and to ask them to take on the stage. So enjoy tonight.
Thanks all for joining this session. As Dan said, this session is about Greener.Land, which is a tool for restoring degraded land. And Eli next up will tell you much more about the tool itself, but I'll tell you a bit more about the journey, why we have developed this tool and why we think it's necessary to do this. As Dan already mentioned, we've teamed up as Just Dig It. I work for Just Dig It as a landscape restoration expert, together with Nature Squared in developing this tool. First, a bit about Just Dig It. What we do as Just Dig It is a combination of what we call landscape restoration. So using simple techniques, simple interventions to bring back vegetation in dry and degraded lands, as you see here. And I'll show you some more slides about these water buns next up. We combine the landscape restoration as physical activities with communication and media. So all sorts of channels to reach people and build a movement and help them regreen their land. We do that through creating a movement in cities using billboards, radio, TV, SMS, and we combine that with rural activities like you've seen in this video tour, that we reach down to villages, show them fun and educational movies about how people can regreen their land. And we're working on a mobile regreening platform, a app and other tools around an app that tell farmers how they can regreen their land themselves and really take them by the hand in an engaging, fun, and step-by-step way. And why do we do that? Why do we feel that is important? Well, this is the thing we want to avoid. Degraded landscapes, steep hill slopes with a lot of erosion, which you often see, sadly, in a lot of landscapes across Africa. And the sad thing happening there is that often the areas are dry, but when it starts to rain, there's heavy downpours, and you see things like this happening. The topsoil being washed away, the fertile part of the topsoil together with the seeds and the nutrients which are there and the microbiology which is in that soil, all being flushed away in heavy downpours of rainfall. And then leaving the land dry and barren like this. This is a photo of Kuku Group Ranch in southern Kenya, an area where Just Dig It is active with restoration programs. And this is an area where Maasai pastoralists live of the land, of the grasses, together with their livestock, together with wildlife. And as you can see, there's not a lot of grasses left for both the wild stock and the wildlife. But you do see these large erosion gullies. So that's happening there, heavy rainfall. And all that water is washed away into these gullies and then running off downstream, and then downstream causing flooding and damage to infrastructure, as you can see here. And then within a matter of hours, days, or weeks, that precious, fresh rainwater is lost, and then leaving the land barren and dry again, and that fresh rainwater is flowing away unutilized into large lakes or into the ocean. And that's what we want to prevent. Well, how do we do that? As Just Dig It, we do several things depending on the local conditions. But this is one example that we're quite famous of. We digging these what we call water bunds. In French, they often call them demi-lunes, half-moon shaped pits in the ground, not too deep, about 30 centimeters deep, that trap rainfall and prevent it from running away, and allowing the soil to take up that rainfall and for vegetation to recover. And you can see what's happening. And we don't do that at a small scale, but at a really massive scale. Here you can see tens of thousands of these water bunds in a landscape. And we do them, we dig them in between the gullies. So we prevent the water from reaching those gullies and keep the water on the land in between those gullies. And what's happening after the rainfall, you see all these half-moon water bunds, they capture a bit of rainfall. Rain that otherwise would have flown away and be lost and even cause damage downstream. All that water is being retained on the land. And then fairly quickly, seeds which are either naturally present in the soil or that we apply to the soil, they start to sprout. And vegetation inside these half-moon bunds is coming back. And here you see a series of drone shots from a site, Pembamoto, in central Tanzania. In 2018, we were still digging them. You can see them on the top here. Some of the bunds were still plotted out only on the land. Digging had to start. A year later, the grasses have appeared back inside these half-moon bunds. And the next year and the years after that, the grasses start to spread even beyond those water bunds. This shows that the impact of physical landscape restoration can be tremendous and fairly quickly as well. Which is a good thing, but then that triggers the question on what to do. And we receive a lot of emails and queries from other people across the world, a lot of them from Africa. We've seen your water bunds. This is what we want to. I live in Cameroon. There's a degraded patch of land. What are the dimensions of your water bunds? And then I always have to tell them, well, that depends a bit on your local conditions. There's so many different things that you can do. And I show them, send them a PDF version of a book like this, which contains dozens and dozens of physical landscape restoration interventions or social interventions that you can do to restore degraded lands. Since bunds don't work everywhere, if the soil conditions are not right, the bunds may wash away. Or if your soil is too, if your land is too steep, the bunds can wash away and break. But if the slope of your land is too steep, there's other things you can do. You can create these eyebrow terraces or banquettes. Same shape as these half-moon water bunds, same concept, only they're made of stone. So a bit harder to make, but they hold up against more steeper slopes or more intense rainfall. In other areas where there's less existing vegetation or there's fewer community members that can help in the manual digging, you can dig interventions like these using a tractor with a plow, for example. In other cases, you shouldn't do that as you're damaging the soil or damaging any existing vegetation which is around. If there's a lot of stones, don't try and dig water bunds. It's way too heavy with all the stones lying around, but pile those stones up along the contours, and they help to prevent erosion, trap rainwater, and reduce erosion. On agricultural land, I wouldn't recommend digging half-moon bunds, but you can make more linear interventions that have the same effect and trap rainwater and reduce erosion, fanya juu or fanya chini, as they call them in Swahili. Or you can even construct full-fledged terraces, which have a big impact, but are more intensive to create. The thing I want to emphasize here is there's many different options in landscape restoration. And that's the challenge that we're facing in this field. It's hard for people to assess what they can or should do to restore their degraded lands. Everyone is aware that there's degraded lands throughout Africa and elsewhere too. And with climate change, that's only getting more. But what to do about that? And there's books like these that help you out with that. There's other websites that provide wonderful manuals. But there was no simple tool that individuals or NGOs can use to kind of explore what options are around. And that's what we've been working on together with Nature Squared, developing this web tool, Greener.Land. And that's hopefully helping people, farmers, other landscape restoration practitioners, NGOs or governments in trying to find out what can work on their land to restore their degraded land. And here I stop sharing my screen and hand it back over to Eli, and she'll explain more about Greener.Land, the website, in detail.
Thank you, Sander. So I'm going to try and give a bit of a tour around the Greener.Land website, but also talk about what we've been doing other than just the content you will see on there directly. So I'll start by sharing my screen so that you can see the platform itself. Okay, so this is the main website that you just saw before in the screenshot of Sander. And it's really focused on trying to simplify all of these complex landscape interventions and create a centralized place where you can access them and find also ways that you can find ones that are most applicable to you as well. So the main interface of the tool, when you open it, you see all of these different interventions that can be shown. Oh, well, right now I have a filter on, so you can't see all of them. But yeah, so for now we have 26 and we're constantly growing them to find new ones that are applicable to different landscapes around the world. We do it through research or also connecting with other projects and seeing what they're doing, and then using that information to create like a simplified intervention that can just at least inspire people and show them what is available and what is even possible in the landscape in the first place. So the way we try and make the tool really accessible and useful is we have a bunch of filters on the side that you see here on the left. So you can look, depending on the slope of your land, you will get different kinds of interventions that come up. If there are stones in the area, so as you saw Sander show just before, there are some interventions where if you do have stones in your area, they can be really beneficial in helping with different kinds of techniques to either stop erosion or to reduce the intensity of water flows, and also to help you harvest water as well. We only have is to really expand those filters. So we're looking at ways to integrate a filter that will kind of give you an estimate of what is the cost of these interventions. Is it high, medium, low? What kind of maintenance level will be required? Is there a lot? Is it going to be yearly? Is it going to be monthly? You know, you just need to keep checking it's working. But other than that, you don't have to put a big amount of effort into maintaining it. And also, we're looking at including aridity, so looking at what kind of climate and what kind of level of rainfall versus amount of dry period do you have, and what interventions are useful in that kind of climate. So right now we do have a rainfall map, for example, that helps. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Is it going to work now? Okay, no, it's not working right now, maybe because I'm sharing my screen. But there you can at least see a map and you can pinpoint your location, or you can look at other locations around the world and see how much rainfall there is annually, and then use that to also find interventions that are most suitable for your landscape. So these interventions that we provide, we try and create a simplified description that tells you, well, what the technique is in the first place, what its other names are, because sometimes you might be actually familiar with one of the interventions, but you don't know the main name that we use. For example, here we use alley cropping, but it's got different names in the Philippines and elsewhere. So we try and make a note of where it's most useful, what kind of region. But a lot of the interventions, a lot of the techniques you can use on your land, they can work in different places. You just need to know how to adapt it to that. So we try and provide resources and case studies, for example, you can see here, of where these interventions are practiced in different places with different climates. So you can see how people have taken these interventions but made them specific to their location and make them work for their use, basically, for what they want to do with the land. So we try and provide an overview of what you need in the first place, what you need in your landscape to be able to implement this kind of intervention. So here you see climate or soil condition, topography, what kind of tree species might be available but also suitable for these kind of interventions. And then we also try and provide a step-by-step method of how to apply this. So in a lot of cases, it's quite simplified. And like I said, we provide case studies so that you can go and see how other people have done this. But it's really about providing a simple educative tool that can give you at least the groundwork of how you can do this yourself and how you can apply this to your own farm or to your own property or the land that you're trying to restore. And what we're working on at the moment is really increasing like the amount of information we have available that can tell you what ecologically will this help you attain on your land, and how will it help you restore different parts of your landscape. So whether it's soil that it improves, or whether it increases local biodiversity, or more focused on crops. But we also try and look at the socioeconomic benefits of these different interventions. So sometimes it's just simply, it improves food security, it increases your access to different markets to sell those foods that you're able to grow on your land now. But in other interventions, we're really working on expanding to show like what is the cost of labor, what is the cost of implementation, the cost of maintenance, and how does that translate into economic benefits. We try to provide different examples of kind of cost estimates, but it varies massively from location to location. As Zander was saying, one intervention won't work everywhere, and different ones will be suitable for different places. So these are always expanding, and they're across a number of landscapes, and we try to connect with others and see what they're doing to make sure that we can provide a wide array of possible interventions, but also for a wide array of reasons. So for example, all of the interventions will have an indication of what the main goals of the intervention are. So you can look at if you're looking at soil health, or if you're looking at crops, but also there's a lot that focus on runoff reduction or erosion prevention and control. So that's the main tool that we're really trying to expand on at the moment. And then the other element of the website is a bit more interactive. Well, it's growing to be that, and that's our community page. And here we're trying to really connect with different projects around the world. Right now, there's 3 specifically that we've looked at, and I'll talk about those a little bit later in the presentation. But these are initiatives that have implemented interventions where we're currently like filming videos of them implementing those. So we go and we see, what is the landscape like? What are the conditions that have caused these landscapes to be this way? And then we also film them implementing some of the interventions, so that the interventions on the website won't just be a list of different things you can apply and some numbered steps, but also you'll be able to see people around the world implementing these interventions, and we want to track them over time to see what kind of improvements are made. And those videos will eventually be here. We're hoping in about a month's time we'll have the first ones published, so that people are really able to get a visual representation of what it looks like and the amount of effort that it takes, and yeah, to really understand what these interventions can do for them. So I'll switch back to the presentation. So we have focused mainly on the tool so far by looking at agricultural and rangeland and pastureland type landscapes. So there's quite a lot on the tool that is focused, on very dry areas or on areas solely for agricultural use, or that is the main purpose that you want to restore it to. And then in the space of the last year, we've also included forest landscapes, because there is such a big amount of forest land around the world that is being degraded and deforested. And we found it was really important to find techniques and ways to improve deforested land and to start restoring the natural biodiversity, but also look for interventions where you can restore nature whilst also creating socioeconomic benefits for the people implementing those interventions. And then finally, this year, we started integrating also coastal landscapes into the platform. So we don't have any on there now, but they're going to be published soon. And there we look at not just how agricultural lands can be affected in a coastal landscape. So looking at interventions that are seeking to reduce erosion that's encroaching onto agricultural lands that are near the coastline, but also interesting interventions such as kelp forest restoration and seaweed restoration. So landscape by landscape, we have different interventions that fit, and we try to give you an idea of the overall category of interventions that can be practiced within these landscapes. So the semicircular bunds are the water bunds that Sander was talking about just before, and also the terracing that we find most suited to these landscapes. And we have a few more examples per landscape. So for rangeland and pastureland, we have a lot on grazing management and how to deal with cattle and make sure that you're allowing different areas of your land to regenerate by, what's it called? By rotating the cattle so that it's not always the whole land being grazed the whole time. And the same with forest lands, it's very focused on restoring the native trees, but also integrating some agricultural means in them. So the categories we use, they're just to give kind of general ideas for those that are looking at what kind of landscape am I in the first place, and they're not too sure what it could be classified as. But many of the interventions can be applied in different landscapes. So it's not that we have these strict categories and they can't be used. These interventions can't be used in different places. And this is finally the coastal interventions. As you can see, they don't have the pretty icons that the other ones have because they're still in development, but this is just to give an idea of what kind of things we're looking at in these landscapes and what we want to provide to be able to help people restore their landscapes. So far, we have been in contact with a few different projects around the world. And one of them, the first one that we'll look at, is the Perma Atlas in Morocco, which is a great initiative in a very, very dry region of the world. There's been increasing climate issues in this region for years, and that has caused declining soil fertility. And this was exacerbated in about 2014 when there was major flooding that really damaged a lot of the lands. It caused a lot of soil erosion, and it's really affected the lands. And because of this, the deterioration of the landscape over time, a lot of the youth has started to migrate to cities in search of better work. And there's not as much effort and much love in the landscape anymore. There's not as many people wanting to really work to better the lands. So the Perma Atlas initiative was started to really try and restore this very dry, very damaged landscape, but it takes a very community-based approach. So one of the interventions that we filmed there, and we will have a bit of a guide of how to implement this and what the socioeconomic benefits are, both in video form, but also already on the website. But the kitchen gardens are about creating a small sustainable food source outside of your house on your land that already exists, and maybe it's degraded, maybe it's just unused. The one in this picture was actually an area outside of one of the villagers' house that used to be used as basically a trash dump, and they let the women convert it into this kitchen garden. So now they grow food for themselves, but they also grow it to share at market and sell, and it's helping restore this part of the village. And they really make an effort also to include the young in these activities. So they put a lot of focus on educating children and women in these different techniques and giving them a super active role so that they're able to grow up and have like a connection to the landscape and a desire to be involved in the restoration of it as well. Another project that Zander touched on before is the Kuku Group branch in Kenya, where Just Dig It has been very active for quite a while. And there's many, many different kind of interventions being implemented there. There's grass seed banks and grazing management practices that are being introduced. And these, again, it's the semicircular buns, just to show how it's restored over time. And also this was another interesting one, the stone lines, really based on using what is in your landscape to try and to regenerate the soil and also reduce soil erosion. And that's just a comparison of, I think it was a 2-year difference, if I'm correct, Sander. I ran it by Meryl earlier.
Within 1 year.
Okay, so it makes a huge difference. So we also have some video footage of that. There's a documentary actually about it on the Just Dig It website that really shows you the different, the condition of the landscape and what is being done to improve it. So you can go and check that out. It's really good. And then finally, the latest project we've been involved in, and this one is quite nice because we have connected with the project just as it was beginning. And this is located in Murcia in Spain, southern Spain, which is a big agricultural area that has become extremely degraded and damaged over the past years. There's a lot of intensive water use in the area, but it's led to a lot of deterioration in the landscape. Increasing heat from climate change has, of course, degraded the soils further. And then there's a lot of problems when there are heavy flows of water because it causes more soil erosion, more damage to the landscape overall. So in Murcia in Spain, we connected with a Dutch couple that have just bought a very big area of degraded farmland, basically. And their mission is to restore this farmland. So when we last talked to them in January, the land had just been plowed in order to get it ready for the next set of restoration activities. And they're going to go back in September and October of this year and really start to look at what interventions can they implement to restore the land. So we're really excited to follow that project and document their journey over the next year or two and see what they decide to do with the land and how it turns out, how successful it is. So right now, yeah, this is how it looks. And they have many interventions that they can try. And some maybe will be ones that we have already covered on the website. But if there are new things that they try as well, we want to document those on the website and also provide that kind of how-to guide, or the simple how-to guide for it, so that other people are able to access that and think about whether they could potentially use it in their corner of the world. So finally, in the next years that we're working on Greener.Land, we really want to expand the project and really want to make the information there really usable for people, but we also want to make sure that it reaches people in general. So what we want to do is really focus on interaction and community as one part of it. So we have these projects that we follow already, but over the next year or two, we want to follow some more projects and connect with different people around the world that are doing different things and really showcase what they're doing to inspire others. But we also want to, around the Greener.Land platform, create a community itself so that people are able to talk to each other and ask, what are you doing and how did you do that and how did you make it work, and really be able to talk to each other and say, and give advice or just to inspire. That way the information becomes more useful and more people can reach it, but also more people can guide each other and tell each other what worked for them, because what works in one part of the world probably won't work in another. And we think this could be a really great, useful element that helps people to share information in a communal way. So we want to do that on the website itself, whether it's through comments, question and answer sections, and being able to share your own maybe vlogs of what you're doing, and then we can put them on the platform and let others see them as well and connect with you. But also through hosting community events eventually. So we want to be able to host events on the platform every now and then, where we can get people together to discuss what they need and what they want and what they're doing to restore the landscapes. So yeah, this is what we're working at the moment, at the very basic comment section to start off with, but we want to really go further than that and make it possible that it's a community platform, basically. And then the second thing that we find extremely important over the next year is making sure that the accessibility and the translation of the material is moving forward, because we know that right now the platform is only in English. And in order to reach other people in other parts of the world and to make the information truly accessible, it needs to be available in other languages. And at the moment, we're trying to figure out which other languages that need to be focused on, other than like the biggest languages in every country of the world, of course. But what languages is it essential to translate it into so that it really reaches those people that can use this information, or that they're able to pass it on to other people. You can read it yourself and then be able to translate it to others by word of mouth. But in order to do that, we need to really connect with people and see what languages in the first place will make it accessible to other people. So part of that accessibility is also creating ways to access the information offline, whether that's through creating PDF versions that are downloaded of every intervention. So you can have the connection once, but then if you're somewhere remote where you want to see if these kind of interventions are actually possible, or you want to see the guide of how to implement it, you're able to still access it. And we also think that creating an educational brief will help with that, so people understand how to use the tool in the first place and what it offers them. And then a part of that, which was mentioned before, is these kind of tutorial videos that we're making with the different projects that we follow to show what a real example of this being implemented is. So also to include, increase the accessibility, we want to continue expanding the intervention contents and updating the tools. So we will look at different landscapes, we'll look at new interventions, and we'll also look at new ways for the interventions to be filtered, because right now, as you saw, we have a few filters, but we know that there are much more helpful pieces of information that we can add that can help you really determine what is best for you and what is best for your landscape. So this is what we are working on at the moment, the offline version, to give you an idea, that it will show the summary of the costs and the benefits, and also include how we apply. And yeah, to finish off, this was a message from one of the villages that we were talking with in Morocco. And he was really passionate about making sure that we bring people back to caring about their lands and focusing on bringing nature back to our land again. So thank you all for listening.
Great, guys, and thanks very much for the talk. It was really interesting, and I think a global topic. I mean, there's so many places around the world that you're doing projects, and I think we can all learn from each other. So it's just amazing, and thank you very much. We are going to ask everybody, if you have a question, please will you just go down to the reaction tools at the bottom and hover over there, and then you can raise your hand if you would like us to unmute you, and you can ask your own question. And I'd really encourage you to do that, because it starts a bit of a conversation, and the engagement is always valuable and rich. We have got one question so far in the chat, which I've been asked to read. So Bridget Poll has asked a question of you. Do you have support from government departments, and are you up against big companies like Monsanto, which depends on profits from seed, pesticides, and chemical fertilizer? Either of you feel free to answer the question.
Yeah, thanks. Excellent question. I can answer it on behalf of Just Dig It. So the project that we do, and Just Dig It as an organization, we are a non-profit. And we are funded not through governments, but mainly through private companies, consumer donations, and institutional funding. And with that, we implement our projects, and we do that together with our local partners. In each area that we're active in each landscape, as we call it, we work with what we call implementing partners, which are local organizations that have been around for a long time. They know the communities, they know the governments, and through them we are in touch with the local governments that help us successfully implement the projects. And what we do is in line with their government program. So generally they're very supportive, and they help us to reach the communities, which is crucial to make the projects a success. Currently we're not fighting the Monsantos or other commercial companies. I think we're showing farmers that there are solutions to that. There are alternatives to that. For example, the work that we do in Tanzania is about promoting agroforestry, showing how simple it can be for smallholder farmers to bring back trees on your land, and the benefits that those trees can give to you: more resilience, alternative income sources, without having the need for buying expensive pesticides or herbicides or expensive seeds. Just through natural regeneration, trees which are naturally sprouting and coming up. And same for the work that we do on the rangelands. It's all naturally sprouting grasses or locally produced indigenous grass species.
Thank you, Sander. Eli, would you like to add anything to that, or can we go to the next question?
I think that's pretty much it. I mean, for Greener.Land, we don't have any government support or anything like that. It's just been funded by a lovely organization in the Netherlands for the current phase of it.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Neil Wilson, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Thanks,
hi,
Neil. If you can go ahead. Cool.
Thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can. Just maybe come a bit closer to the mic.
Thank you so much for a wonderful talk. I just got three brief questions. The first is, when it comes to vegetation rehabilitation, do you allow the natural plant succession to take place, or do you use good species, local, indigenous to the local area, or do you use other good species for rehabilitation purposes that aren't necessarily indigenous? The second question is,
sorry, Neil. Let's ask
how do
Neil.
you,
Sorry,
yes,
sorry. Let's get them to answer the questions one at a time. I think that'll be better for the flow, if you don't mind.
sure.
Perfect.
Yeah, and also better for my memory. Yeah, we use, again, as just degraded, we use local indigenous grass species, which we grow ourselves. First, we bought them from government institutes, which was pretty expensive. And now we've helped Maasai women groups to set up what we call grass seed banks, where they grow local indigenous grasses. We teach them how they can harvest those grasses and use those grasses. We first tried not to do any seeding, so just naturally sprouting vegetation. And there we saw indeed a lot of pioneer vegetation, and we've been, the oldest projects are now 7 or 8 years old. And there's succession taking place, but it hasn't reached the stage of the perennial good grasses that we are mainly interested in, and mainly our support for the livestock. So we are trying to speed up the process by sowing good quality indigenous grasses.
Thanks, Sander. Neil, do you want to ask your second question, please?
Yeah. How do you encourage the local communities to prevent overgrazing, which in Africa in many cases has led to the land degradation?
Yeah, another good question. It's something we closely work on together with our partners. So before selecting the sites, we do desk studies when it comes to physical suitability. So which areas are suitable in terms of slope and soil type. But then even more important, we sit down with the communities, or local partners do, and they explain what we're aiming for. And that after restoration, sites need to be rested for a while before they can be opened up for grazing, but then only for small herds of livestock, so controlled and managed grazing. And before starting with a site, the community has to agree on that. And they have to really thoroughly understand the impact, what it means to them, and that in the long run they will benefit, but it will take a couple of years for the restoration to take place. And that even after restoration, they need to continue on with grazing in a sustainable manner. And they have to agree to that before we start.
Thanks, Sander. Neil, your last question?
I think this may have been answered already. Are you engaging with African governments to spread the message and for them to be able to
we do indirectly, so through our partners,
harness the benefits of your good work?
So the connection was a bit shaky, but I think your question was about us partnering with governments. We do that indirectly through our partners. Our partners have long-standing relationships with them, and we kind of piggyback on that and work together with them.
Thanks very much, Neil. I'm going to go across to Andrew Mariti. Thank you. Andrew, I'm going to ask you to unmute, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Marty. I just want to make a comment. The poll that has just been, provided here doesn't have English on it.
So
it doesn't have email addresses on it.
No, it doesn't have English as an option to select. So Andrew, I think the point is that the app is already in English, and therefore that wasn't a selection that would be made. It was besides English, which would be the language that would be most beneficial to the communities and people attending.
Okay, no, that was just a concern. But now what I want to ask is, in areas where there is rain deficiency, how do you make sure that your, what can I say now, your vegetables grow, or whatever you are planting grows, how do you make sure that that happens in arid areas?
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, I think a general answer to that is you need to select the right things and grow the right, or try to bring back the right vegetation for those local conditions. So you can't grow tomatoes everywhere, and you shouldn't want to. So look at the area, look at the landscape, look at climatic conditions, see what rainfall is there, and be aware that the climate is changing everywhere. But even in arid environments, there's often a bit of rainfall, which is often not utilized fully. As in those arid areas, there's often flooding in areas. And that's what we want to show, that using those interventions, that's something that you can prevent. So make better use of the local conditions, make better use of the little rainfall that there is, improve the soil conditions in order for vegetation to grow. But then still in an arid environment, you will find different species than in more humid environments.
Eli,
But shouldn't that be one of the areas that the program is needs to look at, for future purposes? That's what I mean. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, I agree with you. It's something we'll take in consideration.
Yeah, I think it's something we try and look at a bit on the platform, because I think that's one of the bigger issues when you have an extremely arid environment and you cannot restore it just by planting and watering and hoping that it will be enough. And that's why some of the projects we have followed, like the one in Morocco, where it's extremely arid, but they do have extreme flooding as well at the same time. And they've had to find, through trial and error, ways that they can help restore their land. And they were doing great. But again, at Christmas this year, they had major flooding that has affected a lot of the interventions that were set up. So they have to restart again, or they have to adapt them again to find a way that makes it work for them.
Yes, because I'm in Gambia, next to Morocco and Mauritania and those places. It's very arid, and you don't know when it's going to rain. So, if you are in such a position where you can assist in growing vegetation, what are the means of drawing water to assist the communities?
Thanks very much. Yeah, no, thanks very much, Andrew. I think the site the selection is also something that is critical, that they do analysis of prior to getting involved. So I think that will be part of that. But thanks for your comments. I appreciate it. Chris Fellows, if I can ask you to unmute and feel free to ask your question.
Thanks, Marty. Firstly, Zander and Eli, thanks very much for a very interesting talk, and also congratulations on the work you're doing throughout your projects. I've got two questions. The first is the restoration of marshland. Eli, I think you spoke about you either have projects or you're looking to do projects on that particular habitat. Where we're on a beautiful and very biodiverse estuary in the Southern Cape, near the southern tip of Africa. And we are losing substantial chunks of our marshland that are vitally important to a whole range of different species, and obviously vital to the actual estuarine environment of fish and all sorts of things dependent on it. Do you have any projects that are looking to either stabilize or reclaim marshland? And then my next question.
Sorry, Chris, if we can just let them answer the first one quick, and if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
No worries. Yeah, well, it's something that we're looking to find at the moment, basically. So we've started integrating more coastal and different landscapes into the platform more recently. And it's what right now we're starting to look into. So if anybody has any projects that are focused on this, it would be really great to share them. Or if anybody knows any contacts that's on the call that are working in these areas, it would be really great to connect on it, because I think it's something important and that it would be good to provide a resource on.
All right, well, that's great. I think this is a perfect case study for you guys, and there are a couple of people that are looking at addressing this issue here, but I think there's a lack of knowledge on exactly how to go about it. So, maybe we can connect, and I can connect you with the relevant authorities that are looking to do the project there. My next question relates to the restoration of natural habitats. There are a lot of landowners in our area that are removing alien vegetation, and we are wanting to rehabilitate that environment and bring back a whole host of indigenous species. The area is traditionally very rich in a diverse range of flora. Do you have any case studies where people have eradicated aliens and reintroduced indigenous species that we can actually look at?
Yeah, maybe first to emphasize or explain what we try to achieve with Greener.Land, or what we show on Greener.Land, are not just our own projects. Might be a bit confusing, since I did explain about some of the projects that we as Just Dig It have started to implement on the rangelands in Kenya and agroforestry systems in Tanzania. The other projects in Morocco, the one in Spain, they're not set up by Just Dig It or managed by Just Dig It. We've helped together with Nature Squared set up the platform Greener.Land, as we want to share the knowledge that we have as Just Dig It, but also other initiatives around the world, connect them to other potential users, potential restoration practitioners. So as Just Dig It, nor as Nature Squared, we have experience in marshland restoration. As Just Dig It, we do happen to have a bit of experience in alien species, in this case, Prosopis juliflora removal in Kenya, which is going well, but is challenging. And I think there's no generic answer, as there's so many local conditions that local settings that have to apply. What we do there is cut away the Prosopis trees and shrubs, and actually find a use for the trees. But there's always the fine balance in not promoting thereby the invasives, as now you're generating a market for the Prosopis poles that we use in our project. So it's a fine balance with both a lot of physical aspects and social and political aspects. Probably too hard to answer during a webinar like this. Yeah,
all right, great. Well, if you're looking for another project, there's a really great project near the southern tip of Africa for you guys. Anyway, thank you both for your respective answers. I will do.
Yeah, please, Chris, also for others on this call, what we want to do here with Greener.Land is showcase cool initiatives like you guys are working on. So if you have something that you want to share with the rest of the world, please send us an email. Our emails are in the chat. We'd love to see if we can feature what you are doing on the platform.
Super. Thank you, Zander. Thank you, Ilaf, both of you, for the work you're doing and a great talk.
Welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Awesome questions. I'm going to go through to Roland now. I'm going to just ask you to unmute, please, Roland. And feel free to turn on your camera if you can. Be nice to see you from Angola.
Hi, Marty. Thanks. Thanks. This is just an observation and a little bit of a case study. I work in Luengi-Luana National Park, which is in the southeast of Angola. It's 94,000 square kilometers, a huge area. And there have been people living there since the beginning of time. And the great problem that we have is slash and burn agriculture. I mean, for me, that is probably one of the greatest threats. It's worse than poaching. Habitat destruction is far worse. So we brought in an NGO called Akadir, and we are training the local communities on eco-agriculture. The difficulty in a Kalahari sand area, when they practice slash and burn, is that it allows, because it's quite close to the river, you get castor oil and lantana moving in afterwards. They farm for maybe 2 seasons. And what we're doing is getting them to have a permanent area using mulch. But the big problem is water retention because of the sand. Some areas have concrete, which is all mollusks and that form a base. But the problem is then there's competition with the wildlife, especially the elephant. And we're currently looking at the use of bees to protect the crops by using bee fences. But it's so difficult to get people that have been practicing slash and burn for generations to look at staying in one place, protecting especially the wetlands, the springs. And then soil erosion is a big problem, and then obviously competition between the crops and the things like elephant and hippo. So it's a real thing. And what you guys are doing in terms of sustainable, well, food security is a critical issue, because for me, that's one of the main reasons why we have poaching, because people are starving and they don't have an alternative. They start off with killing one animal, it ends up commercial. So it's so important, sustainable agriculture in rural communities. And I say in a national park, it's even double with all the wildlife as well. I don't know if you have any comment that you would like to help us with, assist us with the issues that we would face, like alien plants.
Yeah, well, I think you mentioned a range of challenges from soil type, poor quality soils, and to elephant encroachment and changing people's behavior. And that sounds very familiar. Often there's no single cause of degradation. I do think that proves the value of a tool like Greener.Land. We're not claiming to give you the single solution to all your problems. What we are trying to do is open up your eyes to show you the range of solutions. And hopefully by doing so, you can find one or perhaps combine a few into a new one that might work for your specific case. And I think that's the only way to keep on inspiring each other, learn from other successes, but also learn from our failures, and help each other out and coming up with challenges to these many coming up with solutions to these many challenges that are around.
No, thank you very much. No, I've realized there's no silver bullet, and it's got to be an integrated approach, of which cultural change, an old-fashioned farming method,
collaborate and to learn, and from all the, I think you're going to spend some time on their website going through all of the suggested solutions, and wishing you all the best for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew, I'm just going to ask a question from the Ramoroka. In areas where the soil does not support vegetation growth, what do you use to improve the soil? And in terms of areas where you're doing your work, are you planning to expand it to Africa as a whole?
Yeah. Well, if I answer that from a Just Dig It perspective, again, just one of the use cases that we are featuring on Greener.Land. Actually, most soils do support some type of vegetation growth. And that might not be the ultimate species or a very palatable species, but anything is better than nothing. And in our site selection, we do try to look for areas which have degraded, so used to have vegetation but no longer have, and implement restoration projects there. Yes, there are some areas where the soils are saline, so containing large volumes of salt, and there no vegetation or very distinct species of vegetation only grow there. Those are not our areas of focus. We try to focus on areas which used to have vegetation maybe 10, 20 years ago, but are slowly degrading. We try to revive them and bring back vegetation in those areas. And I think that's a general recommendation that I would have and talk to communities which were the promising areas 10, 20 years ago, as often they will show you where the potential is for restoration currently as well. And the question, if we are planning to expand to Africa as a whole, yes, as Just Dig It, we are growing and starting up projects in new areas. And we are developing this app, Regreen app, and a whole platform around that should allow farmers throughout Africa to learn these techniques and really start practicing it themselves. But that's still a work in progress. And with the Greener.Land platform, Greener.Land website, we are already trying to reach restoration practitioners or farmers globally. And yes, we're very much interested to get to know and get in touch with other great use cases throughout Africa.
Thank you for the question. Andrew, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Thanks, Marty. I really appreciate what Eli and Sanda are doing. Very appreciative. some of us grew up under very terrible conditions. But, you know, among all of these things, my concern is, are governments involved in what these two guys and many of them have done or are doing? Who do we vote for to make our life better? Are you guys involved in them and saying, hey, this is what we are assisting you to make better the life of the people that have voted for you? Thank you, Marty.
Thanks, Andrew. I think they have partially answered. I'll let them add in to my comments, but they aren't specifically aligned to any one government or don't have any government partnership and sponsorship or anything like that. However, through their network organizations, they do try to have influence within government. But I think very often the politics of life and of countries are very difficult to navigate. And I think they are trying to have a solution that can be adopted by any person, whether they're affiliated to government or not. I don't know whether Eli or Sanda want to add to what I've answered.
I think that's accurate. We work a lot with the Dutch government as Nature Squared in the Netherlands, but we don't have a direct connection with any African governments or any affiliation. So as Sanda was saying, it's a lot of piggybacking off of connections that they do have through Just Dig It with local projects to try and make a difference through more community and educated means.
Yeah.
So I think, okay, go.
No, I think you explained this well, Marty. And actually with Greener.Land, we want to reach individuals, organizations, NGOs, and also governments. I think our target audience is a more technical, agricultural, restoration focused audience, and not so much interested in the politics behind it, although we understand it's important.
Okay, thank you, Marty.
No, but I think, Andrew, that's actually where all of us who have been listening to this talk can assist to spread the word and to, whether it's influencing our local councillors and spreading the word so that this initiative can be used to benefit the communities, because ultimately
that's what I'm doing this side. Yeah, sure. Yes.
We're looking forward to some positive feedback, Andrew. Great.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. I'm not too sure if there are any other questions. I'm just busy having a quick look here. Don, I see you have put some comments in the chat. Would you like to unmute yourself and just add to the discussion? It's open for all of you to comment, please. Let me find Don.
Yeah, maybe just one more clarification on one of the questions that was asked about, is it rain-fed, or one of the questions that was also about these very, very dry areas. What we really try to focus on is we're not able to transform the desert into a green oasis. But what we do try to do is showcase interventions that can make sure that whatever rain there is, or whatever there could be in terms of vegetation, but is no longer the case due to overgrazing, due to other human factors. How can you revert that, and how can you make sure that the potential that is in your landscape can be met? And yeah, even a little bit better maybe, but of course we're not able to perform miracles. But like Sander also said, even the harshest conditions, nature can thrive. So there's almost no landscape that couldn't be of huge value. And it's up to us as humans mostly to do less and and make sure we don't overgraze or degrade the landscape. But where that has been the case, it can also be up to us to give that push in the right direction. And you can see that often these even very, very simple techniques can be enough, but it does need that little push, and especially in the whole situation where we have also still a human population as part of the landscape that also wants to thrive, and also wants to increase their livelihoods and be a happy part of that ecosystem, that asks for even a bit more of consideration of how do you use the landscape in a way that both nature and humanity can thrive within the landscape. So I think that's really what we try to achieve. So yeah, maybe that as my bit to the conversation.
Thanks very much, Don. And yeah, I think you guys are doing a commendable job and an awesome initiative. And we really look forward to hearing a lot about Greener.Land and Just Dig It and all of these initiatives. And it's becoming a thing that all Africans are talking about in trying to restore their degraded habitats. There's not many other chats, so I'm not too sure if there's anyone else who is feeling brave enough to put up their hand and ask a question, or if not, yeah, I just want to say thank you really to you guys. It's been an awesome, inspiring talk.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, Johan, if you want to add anything. Say your final goodbyes.
Marty, they literally put a smile on Africa. So there's not a lot of people that can say that they put a lot of smiles on Africa. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Cool. Just one maybe last question from my side then. I mean, I saw some of the photographs that you had there in terms of the terracing, which you typically see in sort of the Far East with rice paddies, etc., and I think sometimes a little bit on coffee, etc. Is that a viable solution in certain, only in specific soils that are maybe more stable? Just be interested as to where that would be used, because I've not really seen it much in Africa. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, well, good question. Indeed, in Asia, for example, there's places where they do a lot of terracing for rice paddies, but they're used in semi-arid environments too. For example, in Central Kenya and Tanzania as well, there's a lot of areas where they practice terracing in dry environments and fairly poor quality soils, just in order to reduce erosion and improve the soil conditions and allow agricultural practices. And so, yes, terraces, again, there's many different types of them, and they can be used in many different types of agroclimatic conditions, but also in arid or semi-arid ones.
Okay, yeah, because sort of the impression I always had, and maybe I'm misinformed, but you know, those sort of terraces are not friendly to biodiversity and nature in a way, but I guess they do stop the problems with soil erosion and gullies and all of that sort of thing. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, I think the impact on nature and biodiversity is not so much whether or not to terrace, but more whether or not you practice agriculture. And if you happen to practice agriculture, and often people need to in order to produce food or survive economically, then better do it in a sustainable manner without erosion and land degradation, and terraces could provide a solution to that.
Okay, cool. I think Don's going to ask you the final last curveball question. So please go ahead, Don, and let it rip.
And just to add, maybe, is that the brilliant thing of some of these interventions is that as nature takes over for around 3, 4, 5 years, the actual intervention can no longer be seen with the human eye. And the same with these terraces, as you use them to stabilize the soil, to bring back vegetation, and you don't maintain the terraces as they are, they will become a natural landscape again in not even that long a time. It's just that when we think of those Asian rice paddies, which is a very labor-intensive way of upkeeping the landscape in that way. I know it's a very pretty picture as well, but it's also quite a very constructed landscape. But if you wouldn't do all the upkeep, it becomes to a natural landscape again, but with less slope and with much more vegetation, much more structure to the soil, etc. So we also have to think of these interventions as a Kickstarter and not as a new landscape that you have to maintain like that.
Thank you very much, Don. And I think on that note, without any further questions, I just wanted to final thanks to Eli and to Sander and to Don for your very interesting talk this evening, and have a great evening further.